I wasn't supposed to be home until tomorrow. That morning, I was still in Tampa, stuck in the tail end of a conference that had already run 2 days longer than planned. Meetings, panels, networking dinners I couldn't care less about. But finally, mercifully, everything wrapped up early. I remember looking at my watch after the last session and thinking, if I hit the road now, I'll make it home by 9. It was a spontaneous decision. I didn't text Sammy. Didn't call. I figured I'd surprise her. It wasn't just the early wrap-up, it was that our anniversary was 4 days away and I wanted to do something that might feel a little unexpected. A good surprise for once. Something sweet. Something simple. I even picked up her favorite bottle of wine from a shop on the way out of town. She always said surprises were romantic when they weren't for Instagram. I pictured walking in, the lights low, music playing in the background. Maybe she'd be cooking or curled up on the couch watching something dumb and cozy. I thought she might jump a little when she saw me in the doorway, then smile and rush over, arms out. The whole thing played in my head like a movie. But real life didn't follow the script. It was a humid Savannah night, but not hot enough to be unbearable. The crickets were loud. The porch light flicked on automatically as I stepped up the front steps and unlocked the door. The first thing that hit me was the quiet. Too quiet. No music. No lights. No TV murmuring from the living room. The house was dark, save for the hallway lamp on a timer and the soft glow from under the kitchen vent. And the kitchen, Jesus. Spotless. No pans on the stove. No dinner in progress. Not even a stray wine glass in the sink. It looked like no one had touched it since morning. I stood there for a second, holding my overnight bag in one hand and the wine bottle in the other, unsure of what to do with either. Sam. I called out, but not loud. Just enough to test the silence. Nothing. Then I heard something. Laughter. Light, muffled, playful. Coming from the side of the house. I moved toward the sound like I was being pulled. Down the hallway past the dining room to the French doors that opened onto the side terrace, a space we talked about fixing up a dozen times but never got around to. A few plastic chairs were out there. An old table we'd salvaged from a neighbor's garage sale. It wasn't exactly where I'd expect to find her. I didn't open the door. I didn't call out. I just looked through the blinds. And there she was. Sammy. In a loose black tank top and jeans. Barefoot with her legs pulled up onto the seat. Laughing. Smiling. A glass of wine in her hand. Her hair was half up like she'd done it quickly. Sitting across from her was a man I didn't recognize. Maybe mid-30s. Well-dressed in a not trying too hard kind of way. Rolled-up sleeves. That expensive kind of casual. He leaned back in his chair, legs crossed, clearly comfortable. There were 2 plates on the table between them. A candle. A half-finished bottle of red. It looked, in asterisk mate. Not over the top. Not romantic in the candlelit dinner on a rooftop sense. But familiar. Easy. They clinked glasses. She laughed again at something he said, her body leaning just slightly toward him. I stood there, frozen, watching my wife laugh with a stranger like she didn't have a husband. Like she wasn't expecting anyone at all. My stomach dropped. I slid open the door. Quietly but not secretly. Her head turned the second she heard it. Her expression the moment she saw me was shock. Genuine. Her eyes went wide. I could see her throat tense as she swallowed. But then, just as quickly, it vanished. Her shoulders relaxed. She smiled. Smooth. Effortless. Like she'd rehearsed it. Justin, she said, standing. Oh my God. You're back. I looked at her, then at the guy. He stood too, a little more awkward than she had, like he wasn't sure whether to shake my hand or pretend he wasn't there. I thought you weren't getting back until tomorrow, she said. Meetings ended early, I replied, keeping my voice even. This is Eli, she said, gesturing toward him. He's a coworker. We were just going over a project. I figured the terrace would be quieter than inside. Eli offered his hand. I shook it. Firm grip. Neutral smile. He looked at me the way people look at cops who pull them over, polite but a little too careful. Nice to meet you, he said. Didn't mean to intrude. I didn't say anything back. After a moment, he glanced at Sammy. I should probably get going anyway. Big day tomorrow. Right, she said quickly. Thanks again. He gave me a short nod as he passed. I stepped aside to let him go. We both stood there for a moment after the door closed behind him. I waited for her to say something. Anything. Instead, she turned back toward the table and started clearing the plates like this was the most normal situation in the world. You really caught me off guard, she said. You could have texted. You weren't expecting me. She looked up at that just for a second. No, I wasn't. I figured I'd surprise you, I said, my voice flat. Early anniversary thing. She paused just a beat too long. That's sweet. Really? I just wasn't expecting anyone. That's all. I nodded. I didn't know what else to say. She poured the last of the wine into her glass, took a sip, then said, "You're being weird." Am I? Yes. You're staring at me like you think something's going on. I didn't say that. But you're thinking it. I didn't respond. She sighed, put her glass down. He's a coworker. We're working on the fundraising piece I told you about. He's one of the advisors. You never mentioned his name. Well, I didn't think it mattered. I nodded again. Just nodded. There was nothing else to say. Not tonight. Something inside me, the part that used to assume the best, that trusted her without needing evidence, something in that part broke. Not all the way. Not out loud. But I felt it. A shift. Subtle but irreversible. She cleaned up the terrace and went inside. I followed a few minutes later, carrying my bag upstairs. I didn't ask her anything else, and she didn't offer anything more. The bed felt colder than I remembered. She crawled in beside me eventually, turned to her side, and said goodnight like nothing had happened. I laid awake for a long time. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of the shower running. Sammy was already up, moving around like nothing had happened. She even greeted me with a cheerful, "Hey, stranger," as she wrapped a towel around her hair and kissed my cheek. That kiss, it landed like a coin tossed into an empty well. Hollow. Mechanical. I didn't kiss her back. I watched her move through the bedroom, picking out clothes, humming to herself as if last night hadn't cracked something in me. She didn't ask how my trip had gone. Didn't ask why I came back early. She didn't say a word about Eli. By the time she left for work, her coffee-to-go mug in one hand and her car keys in the other, I was sitting at the edge of the bed, fully dressed, wondering what the hell had just happened over the last 12 hours. That morning, I didn't go into the office. Instead, I sat in the kitchen, scrolling through my phone, replaying the scene on the terrace over and over again in my head. Her laughter, the wine, the body language. The ease. There was something about it I couldn't shake. And the more I thought about it, the more I started to see the threads that had been unraveling for a while, months, maybe even a year, without me realizing it. It's strange how your brain does that. You brush past things in real time, tell yourself you're overthinking, or that it's just stress, or that your partner's allowed to change. But then something flips the switch. You look back and suddenly every weird moment feels like a breadcrumb. Like you were walking through a forest full of signs and refused to read any of them. I remembered one afternoon maybe 2 months ago when Sammy had left her phone on the counter while she went to grab something from the car. It buzzed and I happened to glance over. The message preview said something like, "Miss you already. Last night was everything." It was from a contact saved under a name I didn't recognize, Rachel, work. But the tone of the message? That wasn't Rachel. That wasn't even how women usually text each other. It was too blunt. Too masculine. I remember feeling something tighten in my chest, but I brushed it off. She came back into the kitchen a second later, grabbed her phone without missing a beat, and I let it go. Stupid. Then there were the work nights. So many of them. She used to get home by 6:30, sometimes 7 if she had late meetings. But lately late had become the default. Tuesdays turned into 9 p.m. arrivals. Thursdays became overnight trips to meet with investors. When I'd ask how things were going, her answers became shorter. Less detail. More vague buzzwords. Busy, but good. Same old. She stopped venting to me. And Sammy always vented. One weekend, maybe 3 weeks ago, she told me she was heading to Atlanta to visit an old friend from college, Melissa. I knew Melissa. She lived outside the city, had 2 kids under 5, and rarely left the house. But Sammy said they were having a girls' spa weekend, so I didn't ask questions. But she didn't post a single photo. And neither did Melissa, who used to flood her stories with candids whenever they hung out. When Sammy came back, she looked rested, energized, glowing almost. I remember noticing the new perfume then. Not the one she always used, the warm, vanilla one. This one was sharper, floral, too strong. Not her style. And yet, she wore it every day that week. She'd also changed her hair, subtle but enough for me to notice. Started working out again. Bought new clothes, tighter ones, with tags still in the shopping bag. She used to roll her eyes at influencer trends. Now she was wearing them. And the photos. At first, I couldn't place it. But it hit me one night when I checked my own profile. Every picture of us, every tagged post from our anniversary, our trip to Asheville, her birthday dinner, was gone. She hadn't just stopped posting about me. She'd erased me. Scrubbed our life clean. That night, I sat on the couch while she was upstairs on her laptop, telling me she had to prep for an early client call. I scrolled through her account, confirming it over and over again. I even checked from a friend's phone to make sure I wasn't blocked from seeing them. Nope, they were just deleted. I asked her about it casually the next morning. Hey, did you archive our pictures or something? I said, pretending like I didn't care. She barely looked up from her phone. Yeah, just needed to clean up my feed. Branding stuff. Branding. You know, professional image. She didn't even blink. Back in the early days of our relationship, Sammy used to tag me in everything. She'd post photos of us on lazy Sunday mornings, *TS of our hands clinking coffee mugs, blurry selfies from concerts. Now I didn't exist in her digital life, and I was supposed to believe it was for branding? I started noticing her voice too. The way she spoke to me, less warmth, no teasing, felt like I was living with a hotel receptionist. She used to come up behind me while I was brushing my teeth and wrap her arms around my waist. I couldn't remember the last time she touched me without it being a formality. One morning I said, "I missed you this weekend," just to see what she'd say. Her reply, "Yeah, it was a nice break." She didn't even mean it as a jab. She said it like someone commenting on the weather. That phrase kept looping in my head. A nice break. What was I, a burden? A schedule conflict? A house guest she forgot to ask to leave? I started to keep notes. Not crazy detective notes. Just little observations in my phone. Times she came home. New names she mentioned. Places she said she went. I felt like a madman some nights, sitting in bed with my phone in hand, rereading old texts for hidden meanings. But the part that hurt the most, more than the suspicion, more than the changes, more than the missing photos, was how little she noticed me anymore. I could have walked out of the house for good, and I honestly don't think she would have noticed until she needed someone to take the trash out. That's when I realized the worst part wasn't that she might be cheating. It was that she was already gone. Emotionally, mentally, whatever connected us had been snipped quietly in the night, and I hadn't noticed until I tripped over the loose end. The man from the terrace, Eli, wasn't just a coworker. Or maybe he was. But coworker or not, he had something I didn't anymore. Her attention, her laughter, her time. She didn't talk to me like that anymore. Didn't look at me like that. It was like watching someone fall in love across a table. Only I wasn't in the frame. And suddenly, everything felt urgent. I needed to know. Not just guess or assume or sit around analyzing receipts and online activity. I needed something definitive. So I made a plan. It started with a reservation. I figured if I was going to give this marriage a fighting chance, even just to say I tried, I needed to do something meaningful. Something that reminded us of who we were before all the late nights, the quiet distance, the unspoken bitterness. So I booked a table at Sammy's favorite place, Monarch and Vine. It's the kind of restaurant you only go to for something special. Anniversaries, promotions, the occasional "I'm sorry" that costs $42 a plate. It's where I proposed, actually. Table 12, tucked in the back corner, right under a trailing ivy wall that always smells like fresh rosemary. I called ahead, requested that table specifically, made sure they had her favorite wine chilled. I even told the host I'd be coming early, just to set the mood right. I hadn't done something like that in a while, not because I didn't want to, but because I started to feel like it didn't matter. She used to light up at gestures like that. Lately, she barely noticed if I came home with her favorite Thai takeout. But I told myself maybe I'd let things slide too. Maybe we'd both been guilty of checking out in our own ways. So that Friday I left work early, put on a clean button-up, wore the cologne she once said made me smell like a memory. I even shaved, which, judging by her recent passive-aggressive remarks about my scruff, felt like a peace offering. I got to the restaurant 20 minutes ahead of our reservation. The host greeted me by name. "Right this way, Mr. Brooks. Table 12, just like you asked." I followed him through the dining room, my stomach a weird mix of nervous and hopeful. I kept picturing her walking in, surprised to see me already seated, smiling that old, open smile, the one that used to feel like home. But I never made it to the table, because halfway through the dining room I stopped. I saw her, not coming in, already there. She was seated at a corner table I didn't request. Same ivy wall, same cozy lighting, just not with me. She was with him. Eli. The same guy from the terrace. The coworker. The project partner. The man she looked too comfortable with in our own backyard. They were already a bottle deep into a bottle of red. Her hand was resting on the table, palm up. His fingers were lightly brushing hers. And she was smiling. Not the polite smile she gave me these days. Not the performative grin she put on when we took photos. This was something else. It was relaxed. Familiar. Soft in a way I hadn't seen in months. They weren't talking about budgets or deadlines. They were sharing dessert. 2 spoons. 1 plate. Laughter. I froze. The host turned, noticing I had stopped. Sir, he asked, confused. I shook my head. Sorry, I murmured. Change of plans. I pulled out my wallet, walked directly to the front desk, and asked for the check on table 17. I paid for their meal. Appetizer. Entree. Dessert. Wine. Tip. Everything. The hostess looked at me funny but didn't say anything. I could feel her watching me as I signed the receipt. Then I turned and walked out. I didn't confront her. Didn't storm up to their table. Didn't make a scene. I don't know if that makes me weak or strong or just numb, but something in me had already shut down by the time I hit the sidewalk. It was like my body knew what my heart hadn't wanted to admit. I wasn't her partner anymore. I was the ghost of her past, and she was already rehearsing a future that didn't include me. I didn't go home that night. Instead, I drove around with no real destination. My phone buzzed twice, once from my boss, once from an unknown number. I ignored them both. I ended up at my brother Nathan's house around 10:45, standing on his porch with nothing but the clothes on my back and a rage I didn't know what to do with. He opened the door, took one look at me, and said, "You good?" I shook my head. He stepped aside. "Come in." We sat on the porch for an hour. I told him everything. Every detail I could manage without my voice breaking. He didn't say much. Just listened. That's the thing about Nate, he's the guy you want around when you don't want advice, just presence. Eventually I said, "I'm not even angry." And I wasn't. Not in that moment. I felt hollow. Like all the things I thought I knew about my life had just been quietly removed and replaced with silence. "You don't have to be angry yet," Nate said. "You just have to be honest with yourself." And that stuck with me. Because as much as I'd spent the last few weeks in denial, rationalizing things, justifying them, trying to play the reasonable husband, this wasn't just suspicion anymore. It was truth. And it was ugly. Sammy hadn't just drifted. She'd moved on. She was investing her time, her affection, her Macy into someone else while I was still setting the table for 2. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay on Nate's couch staring at the ceiling fan spin in slow circles, thinking about all the little ways she had already said goodbye without using words. I thought about her wedding vows. About how she cried while reading hers. I thought about the first time we saw that house on the marsh, how she said, "This is it. This is the dream." And I thought about that stupid bottle of wine I'd left in my car, still wrapped, unopened. A gift for an anniversary she'd clearly forgotten. She never even looked at the date. Never mentioned it. Never noticed the reservation. I wondered if Eli knew. Knew she was married. Knew she had a husband who once drove 6 hours through a thunderstorm to hold her hand in the ER when she thought she was having a miscarriage. Knew she had a man at home who learned how to make vegetarian lasagna just because she decided, out of nowhere, that animals were off limits for 6 months. Maybe he did. Maybe he didn't. But at that point, it didn't matter. The damage was done. And no version of her story could rewrite what I'd seen with my own eyes. The next morning, her texts started coming in. At first, it was a casual, "Hey, did you forget dinner?" with a winking emoji. Then 30 minutes later, another, "Are you okay?" You didn't say anything about changing plans. You just disappeared. Then a missed call. Then a voicemail. "Justin, I'm getting worried. Can you just text me and let me know you're all right?" Worried. Right? I stared at my screen for a long time. Didn't respond. Didn't delete. Just observed her tone shift from playful to concerned without any real acknowledgement of what she'd done. That's what broke me most, I think. Not just the betrayal, but her confidence. The assumption that I wouldn't know. That if I did, I wouldn't act. That I would sit still and take it. That I'd keep being the safe, reliable husband who let her get away with rewriting reality. And that certainty cut deeper than anything else. I didn't go home the next night either. Nate offered his guest room. I didn't argue. I needed space, time, distance, and clarity, because now that I had my answer, there was only one question left. What was I going to do with it? I didn't text her back. Not that night, not the morning after, not the day after that. My phone stayed on, screen lighting up like clockwork with her name, her number, her tone. Each message like a different mask she was trying on. It started with confusion. "Hey, can you just tell me what happened? I really don't understand why you're acting like this." Then concern. "Are you okay? You've never just gone dark like this. Please talk to me." Then guilt. "I feel like I'm being punished for something I didn't do. If you're mad about something, I wish you'd just say it instead of shutting me out." Then eventually accusation. "This is childish. You're acting like I did something wrong. If there's an issue, let's talk about it like adults." I read every single message. I didn't answer a single one, because by that point, there was nothing to say, not without unraveling into a screaming match or collapsing into something pathetic. And I wasn't going to give her either. I didn't need her spin. I didn't need her rewrite. I had the truth now. Cold, quiet, undeniable. I didn't tell Nathan what she was saying. He didn't ask. He just left a cup of black coffee on the table every morning, offered the guest bathroom, and let me sit in silence if I needed to. That silence became my anchor. It was the one space in my life where I didn't have to perform, didn't have to be the understanding husband or the confused one, or the guy trying to salvage something that had clearly burned itself down. She called the next night. I watched it ring. No voicemail. 10 minutes later, I saw the charge from Monarch and Vine. "You were there, weren't you?" I set the phone down on the nightstand. Later, "You paid for the dinner." Then, "You saw us." Still, I didn't respond, because now she wasn't pretending anymore, and I knew exactly what was coming next. The next day brought a new flurry of messages. Now she was back to being the rational one, the woman who could walk into any boardroom and talk her way out of a failing pitch. "I know what it looked like, but I swear to you, it's not what it seems. You saw a moment, one moment. That doesn't tell the whole story." I kept scrolling. Still nothing remotely close to an apology. Still no acknowledgement that this wasn't just a misunderstanding. She was scrambling to protect the version of events that would keep her innocent, or at least keep her above total blame. "You left without saying a word. You didn't even give me a chance to explain." And she was right about that part. I hadn't given her a chance, because that chance had already come and gone. It was the night on the terrace. It was the months of distance. It was the 1,000 other moments where she could have come clean, or at least admitted we were drifting. But she didn't. She just kept assuming I'd never notice. Or worse, that I'd notice and still stay. That night, I slept for 4 hours straight, the most sleep I'd gotten in a week. And I woke up knowing that my silence wasn't just avoidance. It was a choice, a boundary, a line drawn in the sand where everything that came before stayed behind. 2 days passed, then 3. On the 4th day, she sent one message. "Are we done?" I stared at it for a long time. I could feel the weight in those 3 words, like she was trying to sound casual, but the fear was bleeding through. I think she knew the answer before she sent it, but she wanted me to say it, to make it real. I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I turned off read receipts. Let her wonder. Let her feel that slow unraveling of not knowing, of waiting for a reply that wouldn't come. That aching, suspended moment where the truth gets louder with every passing second of silence. I wasn't trying to hurt her. That's the thing. I wasn't trying to punish. But she had lived in comfort for months, knowing I was always going to be there, always the safety net, the solid ground. She leaned on the idea that no matter what happened, I'd be the one person who stayed reasonable. And for too long, I played that part. I bit my tongue. I filled the silence. I made the effort. Not anymore. Now the silence belonged to her. I went back to our house after 5 days. Not to see her. I knew she was out. Her calendar was still synced to mine, and she had a networking dinner on the east side that night. I walked in around 7 p.m., half expecting to feel something crack open in my chest. But it didn't. It just felt empty. Like a model home someone had half moved out of. My jacket still hung on the hook. Her shoes were kicked off at the foot of the stairs. The scent of her perfume was faint but still there, trapped in the walls like a stubborn ghost. I didn't go upstairs. I didn't touch anything. I just stood in the kitchen, the same spot I'd been in when I saw that text months ago from Rachel, work. I remember how I brushed it off, how I wanted so badly to believe it was nothing. It was always something. The red flags had been flapping for a while. I just convinced myself they were sunsets. I sat down at the table and pulled out my notebook. No phone. No distractions. Just a pen and paper. I started writing. Not a letter to her, nothing performative. Just a list. Things I knew. Things I saw. Moments I'd overlooked. Places where I stopped speaking up. Places where she stopped seeing me. The exact day I realized we weren't in love anymore. And then, at the bottom, "You're not my home anymore." I closed the notebook and sat in the stillness. It felt like the first time in weeks that the noise had settled. The panic, the doubt, the bargaining, all of it had burned itself out. I was just done. That's what silence gave me. Not clarity in the way some people talk about it, no divine realization or epiphany. Just space. Enough space to finally feel how exhausted I was. And to realize I didn't owe anyone an explanation for walking away from something that no longer served me. Especially not her. That night she called again. I answered. Not to talk. Just to let her know I was listening. She exhaled when she heard the line connect. "Thank God," she said. "You're okay?" I didn't say anything. "Please, can we just talk? I've been losing my mind not knowing what's going on." Still, I said nothing. "Justin," she said, voice cracking now, "I messed up. I know I did. But can we talk before you decide anything?" I stayed silent, because the decision had already been made. I just wanted her to feel what I had felt for months. Disconnection. Distance. That sinking realization that the person you're speaking to isn't really with you anymore. When she finally stopped talking, I waited 5 seconds, then hung up. That was the last time I answered her call. 3 days passed before she showed up. I hadn't told her where I was staying. I hadn't said a word to anyone except Nathan, and even he kept his questions at a minimum. But I guess when someone's determined, they find a way. Maybe she tracked me through shared devices. Maybe she called a mutual friend. Or maybe she just drove around until she saw my car parked outside the office. Either way, there she was. Friday afternoon. I had just come back from a late lunch, trying to pretend I still had a normal routine. When I stepped into the building, I saw her through the glass door, standing outside the reception area, arms crossed, trying to look casual but clearly unraveling beneath it. I didn't react right away. Just stood there, frozen, as if I could will her to disappear. She noticed me through the glass and offered a tentative wave. I nodded barely and walked toward the door. "Can we talk?" she asked, voice already brittle. I looked around. "Not here." 5 minutes, she said. "Please." I didn't want to give her anything. But I also didn't want to do this in the lobby with coworkers pretending not to eavesdrop. So I led her down the side stairwell to the staff patio where we sometimes ate lunch when the weather was nice. She didn't sit down. Just stood there, fidgeting with the sleeve of her blouse, biting the inside of her cheek. "You look tired," she said. I said nothing. She nodded slowly. "I guess I should just get to it." I waited. "It wasn't what you think," she began. "Eli and I, yes, we've spent time together outside of work. Yes, it crossed a line. But it wasn't some planned affair. It wasn't like we plotted this." I tilted my head unimpressed. "So it just happened?" Her jaw tensed. "I'm not saying I didn't make mistakes. I did. But the narrative you're building in your head, me sneaking around for months, lying to you about everything, it's not as black and white as it looks." I scoffed. "Tell me what color it is then, Sammy." She blinked. "What? You say it's not black and white. Fine. Then what color is it? What shade of betrayal am I supposed to accept today?" Her mouth opened, but she didn't speak. "That night on the terrace," I continued, "that was strike one. The dinner, that was two. Everything after was just confirmation." She stepped closer, lowering her voice like that made it an asterisk mate. "I didn't sleep with him, Justin." I stared at her. "Not yet or not ever?" Her eyes darted to the side. "It wasn't physical. I swear to you. I thought about it. I won't lie. I was confused. But I stopped myself before it got there." "Because of guilt or logistics?" I asked. She winced. "Because I didn't want to lose you." I laughed under my breath. "You already did." She took a breath, then shifted into a tone I knew too well. "The pivot. The redirect. You haven't exactly been present either," she said. "You think you're the only one hurting?" "I felt alone in this marriage for a long time, Justin. You've been married to your job. You come home and barely talk. You stopped noticing me long before Eli did." There it was. The reversal. I looked at her, expression flat. "You know the difference between being unhappy and being deceitful?" She didn't answer. "One's a conversation," I said. "The other's a betrayal." "I didn't plan this," she said, voice cracking. "I didn't wake up one day and decide to sabotage us." "No," I agreed. You just let it rot slowly and hoped I wouldn't smell it. Tears welled in her eyes. I wanted to talk to you. I wanted to fix it. But every time I looked at you, I didn't know where to begin. You seemed so far away already. Because I was trying, I said, louder now. I was the one booking dinners, making plans, trying to close the gap while you were off having wine dates in our backyard like I was the ghost in my own house. She looked down, wiping her cheek. I know I hurt you. But can we please just start over? I blinked. Start over. Therapy. Time apart. I don't know. Something. I don't want to throw it all away. You already did. Justin, please, she whispered. 8 years. You're really going to walk away without trying. I looked at her for a long moment. Then I stepped back. You're here right now not because you regret what happened, I said. You're here because I didn't give you the reaction you were expecting. She flinched. You thought I'd beg for an explanation. You thought I'd explode. You thought I'd chase. But I didn't. And now you're spiraling because for the first time I didn't make you the center of everything. Her lips parted, but she didn't speak. You're not here for reconciliation, I said. You're here to manage fallout. The silence between us stretched. Then she said quietly, you're wrong. Maybe, I said. But it's not my job to help you figure that out anymore. I turned and walked back inside. She didn't follow. I sat at my desk the rest of the afternoon without doing much. I stared at my inbox. Typed out 3 different emails. Deleted all of them. Eventually, I just opened a blank document and started typing whatever came to mind. Not for work. Not for her. For me. At 5:30, I packed up and left. She was gone. No car in the lot. No calls. No texts. No post-confrontation performance. Maybe she thought she'd made her final appeal. Maybe she still believed I'd come around. But something had shifted in me permanently. When I got back to Nathan's place, I told him she showed up. How'd it go? He asked. I paused. She tried to make it about both of us. He nodded. Of course she did. I sat on the arm of the couch, hands clasped, still absorbing it all. It wasn't even the lies. It was the entitlement. Like she thought she still had the right to fix things on her terms. He said nothing. Just handed me a beer. Later that night, I sat outside with the bottle and watched the sky. No stars, too cloudy, but the moon was out. Pale, sharp. It was the first night I didn't check my phone. Not once. Because at that point, her words didn't matter anymore. She could send 100 more texts. She could show up again, craft another story, cry, beg, bargain. But the part of me that used to care what she said had already gone quiet. Not out of spite. Just self-preservation. I wasn't waiting for her apology. I wasn't waiting for her to break down and admit everything. I was done waiting for anything from her at all.